Transactional writing. You might be asked to write an interview in a test or a class assignment. Interviews obviously are used in magazines or in the media, meaning that it could be an actual magazine interview like this one with Freshly Ground, or it could be something that is broadcast on the radio. And the Spot On Grade 10 Learner's Guide has an example on page 135 of an interview format for something that was broadcast on the radio. The difference really is if you're writing something for TV or radio, which is broadcast with that sense of immediacy, then it really affects some of the sentences you'll write, and it definitely will affect the tense that you use. For instance, here the interviewer says, "We are talking to Mr. Maimani, a financial analyst from Maimani and Associates." So here, are talking you're going to use to introduce the person, you're going to use the present continuous tense to make it immediate at that moment. And then the rest of the interview will also have lots of questions, like any interview, where you probe the person to try and find out information about how to invest money, in this case. Very importantly, it's very similar to a dialogue in the format. You can see the interviewer goes first, and then the person being interviewed goes next, and you have your colon, and you make sure that those names are on the left. And then there's an indent with all your text, the actual discussion here on the right. The difference is that you're not going to make it, so you're not going to have as much drama as with a dialogue. You don't have as much conflict. The other thing is that very often in an interview, even though the media and journalism is unbiased and must look at things from all different points of view, like any good research, it has to be objective. Despite that, you are going to ask questions to kind of get all the facts, and for that you'll use the 5 W's and the H. Where, when, what, where, who and how, all those. However, the interviewer very often knows ahead of time what angle he wants to pursue. So despite asking a well-balanced set of questions, he's also going to kind of hone in on one particular thing. And in this interview, that decision that the interviewer made about what he wants to prove was really about the issue of them being successful, them being a successful band, because he interviewed them 11 years into their career in this particular article. So, yes, so ahead of time, you need to know what do you really want to prove with your interview, and that will sort of form or influence the questions that you set. Interestingly, the idea of interviews is used very often in media. Sometimes it will be, instead of, as you can see here, you've got Bartlett, who's the interviewer in this case. And Bartlett is here in the byline. It says by Bartlett. The byline tells you who wrote this story. So the story is making tracks, freshly ground, still striking the right chords. And there's your byline. That's the journalist, the interviewer. And so in the actual interview here, you can see Bartlett asking the question in red. They've done it like that because they don't want to waste space indenting. So in a test, you've got to indent it because it's okay. You can waste some paper. But in a magazine, they've done it with color to bring out what the question is and what the answer is, red versus black. And that is purely because they want to save some space. And here you have the person answering is Peter. So they've done it like that in square brackets. Just ignore that format for your test. For your test, you've got to do it as the study guide shows, which is very much here. Here's an example. And you can see it's always about having one person's name, the interviewer's name, can be the person's name or the word interviewer, and then the answer. And the point is that it must be lowercase, what is proper noun, so the first letter has to be caps, there's got to be a colon, and then you've got to have the dialogue. Okay, so this example is in your study guide. It's slide number 61. So, yes, just to let you know, in a magazine, you'll get it in this format. You'll see it very often. It could also be in the format of Q&A. In other words, question and answer. They could leave out the names. Although don't get confused, magazines often have things that are called Q&As, like here. And this is sort of an informative piece where they ask a question, and they start with a question just to get you thinking, and then the answer is really long. So this isn't a typical interview with an interviewer and someone being interviewed. This is just a format question to give you the answer. It's more like something in a test, you could say, where you get the memo for the test. You actually get the answer. And it's just about business talk in that case. So yeah, when I talk about Q&A, I don't mean that Q&A. I mean that often in a magazine, the interviewer's name is replaced with a Q and the person answering's name is replaced with an A. So you might see that in real life. So let's say you get this example. You're going away for the weekend and you ask a friend, sorry, that's the wrong example. That's my instructions one. Let's just go to the interview. So the interview is something like, here you are. Sorry about that. So interview, you feel that it is unfair that learners at Hikunweta High School, where you go to school, may not wear beanies in winter to keep their heads warm. Okay, so I've chosen a topic that is contentious. So that's really, the media or an interview is usually going to be trying to dig out some information. And here's a question. You hear about Westerford High School in Cape Town, which has rules allowing headgear in winter for warmth. You secure an interview with the headmaster. Write it. So here, so say that's your instruction. You're going to then start by having, you're literally going to say, your first line is going to be interviewer. Okay, who happens to be you. And here you're going to say something like, many thanks for granting me this interview, something like that. Because obviously you've got to show a lot of respect. It's got to be high register, very polite because it's an authority figure. And then you're going to write something there, introduce, tell him why you are there. Tell him what you want to interview him about. Then the principal, your first question might be, can you give us a bit of background as to how you got to this decision? And then you're obviously going to unpack it with him saying, it all started in 1986 or whatever year you want to say. And so then you carry on like that. So literally that's how you're going to format it. And that should hopefully get you a good mark. Hope this helps.